And what sort of started with some conversation with Jacques has led to me doing more and more in sports psychology, and with not only my clients. Last week I was at my hometown New Berlin, Eisenhower, and I'm now working with their varsity volleyball team and probably going to be working with some of their other teams. I have a real passion for this, and it seems to be make a lot of sense to me to be able to share this. And your coach, by the way, is Mr. Cutting Edge. Because when I talk to coaches all over the place, we're just coming into their own on thinking about sports psychology. And what you have to realize is that 90% of athletics is mental, absolutely mental. And if you can't control the mental and emotional part of the game, you're not going to be able to really achieve peak performance. So varsity players and captains, I say to you, to JV members and new persons on your team, you need to take a leadership role to help and guide them in this whole process. One of my favorite books, I know you're reading Soccer Tough. Is that
Soccer Brain, I think.
Soccer Brain, okay. Is The Champion's Mind. And actually the volleyball team I'm starting to work with in New Berlin, every player is going to be reading this. It's just powerful, how to be a champion. But the principles of this aren't just how to be a champion at your sport. It's really how to be a champion in life. Okay? So I'm pretty impressed with some of the self-slogans that I'm hearing, the words and phrases that some of the varsity players have embraced. And so I want to review a couple of things with you, and then I really want to talk today especially about feeding the good wolf, not the bad wolf. In other words, the self-talk and also having the mind of a champion and really bringing it to everything that you do. So I've taught many of you the 5-2-5 breathing, and part of that is a very important part. Mindfulness is also a growing field in the world of psychology and in sports as well, and even in the workplace. Being mindful of the present moment and totally aware. So breathing first is when we get anxious, when we get nervous, when we get upset. And some of us have different emotional makeups, okay? Some people seem to be very calm and almost too calm, and we need to kind of like energize emotion in them. And then there are some of us who are kind of hotheads. You know, when we lose it, we totally lose it. And that gets in the way of performance. But soccer is not an individual sport. It's really all about the team. And so my behavior, my mental attitude, my emotional state impacts not only on my own performance, but on the entire team. The more you can recognize this and understand this, the better. So it starts first with breathing, okay? And it seems like, well, that's so silly. Why do we have to worry about breathing? And then some of us get kind of caught up in like, oh, are you talking about, you know, meditation and things like that. But really, we do not breathe properly. As athletes, breathing, of course, is vital for everything you do, not only in performance, but what you don't realize is that breathing is also important for mental attitude. When we're anxious, less oxygen gets to the brain. We have less recall of what we really need to recall at that moment. So 5-2-5 is what I've taught you. I'd like to expand it now to really 5-2-7, because we're realizing that it's the exhale. The longer we can do the exhale, that's really going to help us in terms of our breathing. So here's how it works for those of you who are new and have never heard of this, okay? It's deep belly breathing. So it starts from down here. With your mouth closed through your nose, you slowly take in a breath to fill your lungs to a count of 5. If you find yourself having difficulty holding that breath, because you're only supposed to hold it for 2 seconds, if you're like, you have taken it in too fast. Actually, that has a negative effect on your thinking and performance, because it really screws up the whole flow of oxygen. You hold it for 2 seconds, and then pursing your lips, you very slowly, quietly, imperceptibly in terms of noise, release it to a count of 7. May seem very silly, but that's the very first step, okay? Visualization, and I know your coach is doing that with you, It's really how important playing this movie in your head. I'm working in my practice with a young man who is a phenomenal baseball player. He is now a senior, and his dream is to get into the majors next year. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen, but it could. And he really got in a slump. And we had to start working with mental rehearsal in which he got into a batting slump. He's a phenomenal pitcher. And so we had to take through visualization, having him do his breathing, close his eyes, picture his stance as he's standing there with the bat, picturing the ball coming, him focusing on the ball, his swing in slow motion, connecting with the ball, following through all the way, and then running to the base. And by practicing that more and more, he was able to really raise that slump to peak performance. So mental rehearsal, and your coach is going to do things with you. But your mental attitude is critical. Now here's the deal. A lot of players think, you know what, practice, okay, but I'm really going to put it all out at the game. The minute you enter the locker room and start a practice, and go onto the field at a practice, sports psychology tells us you have to bring it all 100% to practice. Because what you bring to practice is what's going to happen when you get out in the field and when you play the game. Often we don't think that. And there are so many things that get in the way of us even trying to achieve that peak performance at practice. You know, we're tired, okay? Maybe we've bombed on a test or a quiz, or we got a lot of homework, or you know what, there's some relationship issues going on that are very upsetting, or maybe there's family things that are going on. Maybe we're not feeling so good physically, okay? Those kinds of things are powerful and impact on our performance. So, really starting with the attitude, I'm going to bring it all to practice, is really critical. Now, the feeding the good wolf and not feeding the bad wolf is negative thinking. The way our brain works, and you've heard me say this if you've heard me speak before, is that our brain cannot decipher truth for untruth. So if you say, oh my gosh, I really suck at this, your brain believes it and then basically sends messages to every part of your body and will help you suck more at it. So you have to learn how to translate negative self-talk into positive self-talk. Phrases that I can do this, I can get this, I can, this is a challenge, but I know I can do this. Now part of the way of doing that is recognizing, and I know for varsity you won 3 of the last 4 games. And so part of this is creating a movie in your head of what was working, what was so successful. I had the volleyball players practice with mental rehearsal, and then this weekend, to their shock and amazement, they hosted a 15-team volleyball tournament, and they were stunned because they came in second place in the championship. They never even expected they would even get that far. So now I'm working with them to saying, okay, we need to create the movie of those games and what was working well, and so now you need to play that in your head of what was your peak performance with everything connected. So the mental attitude, the mental toughness, critical for this. Captains, you need to inspire and lead, okay? So it is not your coach's responsibility to get everybody rallied and focused. Your job is to help with that. Players, this is the challenge for you. Once you start to feel negative about someone else on the team, okay, that influences, and we do know that your attitude towards each other as team members really impacts on overall performance. Now what's interesting about these strategies, this mental skills, and there is a whole bunch of them, from a goal, setting that goal, to these key phrases, sort of like your words and phrases. I love these words. I was looking at the list. Warrior, fire, calm, sanctuary, believe, right here, right now, James, team, effort, okay? Those words, whatever you need to say, so you need to translate that into powerful belief that you can do this. I am convinced that you can take your level of play to another level that you never imagined in your life. But to do that, you have to believe in yourself, you have to believe in your coach, and you have to believe in your teammates. So part of the role of sports psychology is to be an energizer for you, to be a cheerleader for you, to be a mentor, a motivator for you, to help you. Now, I've said to coach this year, I would be very willing if someone on the team is kind of like in a slump, okay? If you are in a slump or your emotions, I mean, I'm 100% Sicilian, and so I'm a very emotional guy. I don't know that I do anything without passion in my life. That's got a good side to it, but it also has a side that can irritate people like my wife sometimes. So, learning to keep the emotions in control. So, I am happy to help you. You know, we could set up some times, whether it's at a study hall or whatever. But mental toughness requires the whole team. So if you have players that are weak in a skill area, the job of those of you who are skilled is, instead of getting on their case, using your abilities along with coach and the captains to help them improve their skill level. So you need to think about for yourself, what are these goals? And I was looking at the worksheet that you gave your team members about the goals for this year, okay? So I think there's, of course, a great goal is, ultimately the goal is to win state. But that doesn't happen by just staying focused there. It's what you bring every single time in every single game, okay? Now, there are certain soccer teams that I know are a challenge. Now, my daughter-in-law used to work at St. Anthony's, and so we had this little feud between the two of us. And I know that team is a pretty tough soccer team, okay? And she actually kind of kept a tally of which year we won, which year they won, and then ultimately what happened in that game in the season, okay? Now, I think you need to be aware of when there is a particular team that's dominating. I know some soccer teams on the varsity level that are really very dirty players, okay? I also know field conditions can be a factor. I also know that sometimes the refs stink, okay? You don't have control over those things. However, what you have control over is your thinking and your emotion. And when we get in those situations, that's where we have to be in control. That's where learning these strategies, applying the self-talk. Then there's the fans in the stands, okay, and the things that they say. So all of those things influence you. And you really have to build each other up. You have to believe that your thinking is going to change the way this game is going. One of the mental rehearsals that I want you to do is when you have a game where there's a mistake, okay, or you haven't even won, typically we look at and focus on the negative. What did I do wrong? And feeling awful about it. Sports psychology, mental toughness says, stop that kind of thinking. So when you've had a rough game and you're feeling a little down and low about your performance, you need to focus on when you had a great game, what were you doing? How were you performing? Really getting in the flow of that. Make that movie in your mind and play it. So as a team, you have to have each other's back. Now, we have to be careful for when somebody gets riled up, what you say to them in a moment. And I've always kind of shared this with you, that I love these kind of like key phrases and words that you can use for yourself. I've often thought if a soccer team or any athletic team, when someone is really worked up, at that moment would just say, hey, 5-2-5, and then the person would know about breathing, that the other team might pause a minute wondering what play you were about to set up. That's just sort of my own sort of like sports psychology, kind of like wondering if that could set something up for them. You have a secret weapon. Your team has a secret weapon more than most athletic teams have, even professional teams. You have the benefit of sports psychology-minded coach and all of the mental toughness and skills that he wants to apply and help you achieve. So, I need you to think about today, what is one thing that gets in the way for me in my performance. And that would be great to kind of talk about, to do sort of like in a circle at one of your practices. You know, it's like what gets in my way of my thinking for my performance in my game, and then really using your coach and your captains to maximize how to change that thinking into positive. So we're going to do a little breathing today because I'm so big on this. So I really can't stress this enough, because whenever you do even mental rehearsal, breathing is important. Now, when you're in the middle of a game, you can't just like stop on the field and do your breathing, okay? But you sure could take kind of a slow breath if you can, even as you're running, but especially you need to say a phrase, whether it's calm or focus, those kinds of things. So, I need everybody to just kind of sit up straight. Okay, all right. Because part of the problem, actually, we don't breathe well as a society. And as students, you especially don't breathe well because you're usually hunched over, okay? So, sitting up straight is important. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes because this gets kind of weird when there's a whole group of people trying to do some breathing, and it just feels kind of silly. So close your eyes, and then I'm going to count this out. So the first 5 with your mouth closed, through your nose, you take in a very slow, deep breath, filling your lungs. I'll tell you to hold it for 2, and then when you release it, I want you to just purse your lips. So, okay, everybody sitting up straight, eyes closed, ready, set, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 1, 2, release. Purse your lips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to do it one more time. Make sure you release that breath by blowing it out your mouth. Ready, set, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 1, 2, release. Blow it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want you to pay attention to how your body feels when you do that. You should really, actually, this is a great thing to even do in transitioning from one class to the next, okay? Or to help you kind of like be mindful of the present. So, speaking of mindfulness, being in the moment. So, this is a challenge because often we're thinking beyond the moment when you're a player and an athlete, or you're thinking about other things. So bringing it to the moment of your practice. So practicing your movie, okay? So you need to think about what is your movie. And one of the movies that you need to play is success. But here's the other thing about mental rehearsal. All of professional athletes, Olympic athletes, practice this. So when you see them, and they, you know, if you watch the Olympics, and they have their headphones on, you know, the earbuds on, and they're kind of like doing this or whatever, they are actually visualizing. You know, it's not just music they're listening to. They are closing their eyes. They are seeing peak performance. So you need to do that before each game. You need to picture yourself doing that, okay? In the game, seeing yourself present, okay? Really following through with everything you need to do to bring to this game. You need to be positive. And it seems silly, like, you know, unrealistic positive, like, oh, we're awesome. Real positive self-talk will get you miles and miles and miles in your performance. Now, I know your coach is going to help you this season, and he's already started. I keep saying I'm really proud of this man because he's light years ahead. I don't know, Coach, did we start like 5 years ago talking about this, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, about 4 years ago, probably.
Yeah. So, and it still amazes me the amount of coaches who aren't even anywhere here with this. So it impacts on everything. So believing in yourself, having this identity. Do you have a slogan? What is your, I read something about the wristband. What does it say?
Yeah, well, we're saying transition 2015 and then return to glory. So transition 2015, kind of, there's 2 meanings. One is transition on the field from offense to defense and defense to offense, because that's a key part of our scheme. And then transition from relatively mediocre season last year do something special this season. And return to glory, we want to get back to the state tournament.
So you have to keep that in the forefront, okay? And the wristbands, is everybody going to be getting those?
Everyone has been issued them, yeah?
You should be wearing them. One of the things about a goal is to have that visual, okay, always before you, okay? So that part's really important, keeping that in mind, having that visual there to see, oh yeah, especially if you're not particularly, up for the moment when you should be. Now I know Coach's wife really talks a lot about nutrition. That's another aspect of this. It all goes together. Your training, so physical skill level, the training of your body, okay? The learning how to really make the most of the positions you're in and the nature of the game fits in with the mental toughness and also with the importance of good nutrition. So, here is the deal. The challenge is on. You guys can do this. I know you can. And this is your secret weapon. So whenever you feel a bit intimidated, whenever you feel a bit down, you need to build each other up. And if you get stuck, you need to go to coach. Captains, you need to be totally mindful of what's happening with the team and with the players. And you need to take that lead. But you know what? Even within the team, each of you can be a leader and achieve that. So these skills are about life. So if you learn this, great. I would encourage you, absolutely encourage you, to get a hold of the Champion's Mind and really to read it, to understand how this fits. One of my dear friends is a senior in the volleyball team at Loyola. They've won the last national championships 2 years in a row. Their team constantly uses these methods and these strategies. They're positive with each other as a team. They do a lot of mental rehearsal after each practice. And actually, one of the practices, the rehearsal they did was they were behind the #1 team by quite a bit. And they rallied to come back, and to everyone's kind of amazement, the last national championship, that was the reality of the championship. They were so far behind, it looked daunting. They weren't going to be able to do it. And then all of a sudden, everything changed. That's the power of mental toughness. All right.